Isildur is mainly known for being the man that cut the One Ring from the finger of Sauron himself. He is also notable for being one of the men that founded Gondor and Arnor, along with his brother and his father. But there is much more to Isildur's life than just these two achievements. And with it recently being announced that he will be heavily featured throughout Amazon's Lord of the Rings on Prime show, we thought it would be a great time to take a deep look into this character's life. Let's get into it.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.
So Isildur was born in Numenor in the year 3209 of the Second Age. His younger brother Anarion was born just 10 years later. Their father was, of course, the great Elendil. To truly understand many moments from Isildur's life, we must look back further to the start of the Numenorean line. So, in case you are not aware, Elros, half-elven, was the first king of Numenor all the way back in the year 32 of the Second Age. As he was half-elven, he had the ability to choose between the life of men or the life of an elf. He chose men. His brother Elrond chose the life of an elf. Over the years, the later kings of Numenor began to resent their ancestors' decision to live as a mortal and desired the power of immortality for themselves. It was because of this that they decided to distance themselves from elves and the Valar, and neglected to worship Eru Ilúvatar. A small group of Numenoreans remained friends with the elves and stayed faithful to Eru and the Valar. They were called, quite simply, the Faithful. Then in the year 3262 of the Second Age, Alpharazon, the king of Numenor, had been corrupted by Sauron. He used the king's desire for power and immortality to convince him to worship Morgoth. Soon after, Isildur had learned that Sauron wanted Alpharazon to cut down Nimloth, which was the white tree that had been brought from the Undying Lands. To prevent this from happening, he disguised himself and broke into the king's court and took a fruit from the tree. However, it did not go as planned, and he was discovered by the guards, who attacked him and injured him badly. Barely managing to escape with his life, he left with the fruit intact. For his brave actions, Isildur received great praise from the other faithful. He was close to death for many months due to the injuries he sustained, but after the fruit of the white tree began to sprout, he awoke and recovered. Over the years that followed, Sauron's influence was slowly increasing. The faithful had decided to leave Numenor. They packed their ships with all their prized possessions, including the Palantir and the seedling of the White Tree. Isildur boarded the ships with his wife and his first son, Elendil. As the faithful left Numenor, Isildur's grandfather Amandil sailed westwards towards Valinor with the hope that he would be able to convince the Valar to spare the others. He was never seen or heard from again. Then, in the year 3319 of the Second Age, Sauron's lies had finally managed to convince Alpharazon that he could achieve what he was seeking: immortality in the Undying Lands. Alpharazon, who was now approaching old age, decided to take an army to the Undying Lands and take immortality by force. However, this of course backfired, and Eru caused the seas to open, hiding Valinor and sinking Numenor to the ground, permanently. Fortunately, the ships of the faithful were actually spared, and it is said that a great wind from the west sent them to Middle-earth. Elendil and his sons established the North Kingdom of Arnor and the Southern Kingdom of Gondor in the year 3320. Elendil was the High King of both realms, but he ruled from Arnor and left the rule of Gondor to Isildur and Anarion. Isildur had decided to build his home in the Valley of the Mountains of Shadow, just on the borders of Mordor. It was named Minas Ithil. It was a beautiful city and became the stronghold to defend against the evil that was still dwelling in Mordor. It was not known by these surviving Numenoreans that Sauron had survived and already returned to Mordor to rebuild his strength. Isildur would use his Palantir to communicate with his brother, who was in Minas Anor, and his father in Arnor. Over the next few years, Isildur had more sons, Aratan and Cirion. Still in the early days of Gondor, Isildur travelled to the Hill of Eric, at the entrance of the Blackroot Vale. On the top of the hill he placed the Stone of Eric, which was a black stone that he had brought from Numenor. He then met with the King of the Dead, who swore his allegiance to Isildur on the stone. But much later, when Isildur would call upon him to fight against Sauron, they refused, and so Isildur cursed them, saying that they would not rest again until they fulfilled their oath. In 3429, Sauron had built enough strength to attack and capture Minas Ithil. Isildur and his family managed to escape and took with them another seedling of the White Tree. They sailed to Arnor to speak with Elendil. Elendil consulted with his friend Gil-galad, the last High King of the Noldor, who resided in Lindon, west of Arnor. Together they formed the last alliance of elves and men, an alliance that was made to oppose Sauron in the year 3420. In the same year, Isildur's youngest son Valandil was born in Rivendell. The great army of elves and men met at Rivendell in 3431 and marched to war together. Isildur and his first three born sons, Elendil, Aratan and Cirion, went with the great army, but his wife and newborn son remained in Rivendell. The war then officially began in 3434, and the Alliance defeated Sauron's forces in the Battle of Dagorlad on the plains outside of Mordor. They then entered Sauron's realm and laid siege to Barad-dûr. This siege lasted an insane 7 years, and huge numbers of lives were lost on all sides, including Anarion, Isildur's brother, who died in 3440. The following year then, Sauron himself had finally decided to join the battle. He fought with Elendil and Gil-galad. Both fought well, but were ultimately killed. Elendil's great sword Narsil had broke beneath him upon his fall, but Isildur took up the hilt of the broken sword and used it to cut the ring from Sauron's hand. In awe of the ring's beauty, Isildur decided to keep it for himself, ignoring the warnings of Lord Elrond and Círdan. Soon after the battle, so soon in fact that the writing on the ring was still visible due to the heat from Sauron's hand, Isildur wrote an account of the ring and its properties. He noted that the ring was hot, and its markings seemed to fade as it cooled. It also seemed to shrink as the heat wore off. He theorized that heating the ring may make the markings visible once again, but he was already so obsessed with the ring that he refused to take any action that may bring it to harm. The book Unfinished Tales has some great details about Isildur's life, which I highly recommend reading if you're interested in going more in depth about this character before we see his story unfold in the Amazon Prime show. After the fall of Sauron, Isildur, the son and heir of Elendil, returned to Gondor. There he assumed the Elendilmere as king of Arnor, and proclaimed his sovereign lordship over all the Dunedain in the north and in the south, for he was a man of great pride and vigour. He remained for a year in Gondor, restoring its order and defining its bounds. But the greater part of the army of Arnor returned to Eriador by the Numenorean road torn the fords of Isen to Fornost. When he at last felt free to return to his own realm, he was in haste, and he wished to go first to Imladris, for he had left his wife and youngest son there, and he had moreover an urgent need for the counsel of Elrond. He therefore determined to make his way north from Osgiliath up the Vales of Anduin to Cirith Fawn and Andrath, the high-climbing pass of the north that led down to Imladris. He knew the land well, for he had journeyed there often before the War of the Alliance, and had marched that way to the war with men of Eastern Arnor in the company of Elrond. Isildur soon returned to Gondor and Arnor to assume his kingship. He had been mentoring Anarion's son, Meneldil, on the duties of a king and intended to leave the rule of Gondor to him. On the 5th of September in the second year of the Third Age, Isildur set out from Minas Anor with his 3 eldest sons and a company of knights. He had planted the seedling of the White Tree before he left. He had intended to deliver the One Ring to Elrond, as suggested by his eldest son and confidant Elendil. Around 1 month into their journey, they were attacked by a group of orcs. The orcs were completely unaware of the ring's presence, but were unwillingly drawn to its power. The men were massively outnumbered and were unable to last the assault. Just before the battle had begun, Isildur sent one of his men away with the shards of Narsil, his father's broken sword. Cirion was killed and Aratan was mortally wounded. Elendil begged Isildur to flee in order to prevent the orcs gaining possession of the ring. Sadly, he agreed. Elendil was then sadly slain, leading the remaining Dunedain. Isildur removed his armour, put on the ring and attempted to cross the river, but the ring left Isildur's finger and fell deep into the water. Initially he was overcome with a sense of loss, but before long felt like a great burden had been lifted from him. He eventually came out of the water but was spotted by a group of orcs and killed with arrows. Isildur's youngest son Valandil then became the king of Arnor when he turned 10. He did not claim kingship of Gondor, and so the two kingdoms became separate. Gondor was ruled by the heirs of Anarion, and Arnor by the heirs of Isildur. It would not be until the end of the Third Age, when Aragorn was made king, that he would reunite the two kingdoms. It was during King Elisar's reign that the evidence for the full story of Isildur's life and death was finally uncovered. The story of the last hours of Isildur and his death was due to surmise, but well founded. The legend in its full form was not composed until the reign of Elisar in the Fourth Age, when other evidence was discovered. Up to then it had been known, firstly, that Isildur had the ring, and had fled towards the river. Secondly, that his mail, helm, shield and great sword, but nothing else, had been found on the bank not far from the Gladden Fields. Thirdly, that the orcs had left watchers on the west bank armed with bows to intercept any who might escape the battle and flee to the river, for traces of their camps were found, one close to the borders of the Gladden Fields. And fourthly, that Isildur and the ring, separately or together, must have been lost in the river, for if Isildur had reached the west shore wearing the ring, he should have eluded the watch. And so hardy a man of great endurance could not have failed to come then to Lorien or Moria before he foundered. Though it was a long journey, each of the Dunedain carried in a sealed wallet on his belt a small vial of cordial and wafers of whey bread that would sustain life in him for many days. Not indeed the Meruvor, or the Lembas of the Eldar, but like them, for the medicine and the other arts of Numenor were potent and not yet forgotten. No belt or wallet was among the gear discarded by Isildur. I thought I would leave you with that great passage about the legend of Isildur's death. So there we have it, my friends, that was the life of Isildur. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Would you like to see a similar video on Elendil and Anarion? So my question for you guys today is this: if Isildur was not killed that day, what do you think he would have done? Would he have just handed the ring over to Elrond? Would it just continue to corrupt him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Okay, so that's it from me today, my friends. Time, as always, has come to thank our patrons. And a big shout out goes to the members of our highest tiers: Kevin, Abram, Matt, Glorfindel of Gondolin, The Sheath, Denver Steel, Gregory, John, Andrew and Pirate747. Again, we can't thank you all enough for the support that's going towards our upcoming short film. We hope you all enjoyed the Q&A that we did a couple of weeks ago and had all of your questions answered. If any of you guys are interested in supporting the project, it's not too late to do so. You can check out the variety of tiers we have available over on our Patreon. 100% of support there goes towards the budget of the film. It's truly a movie funded by the fans for the fans, so we're excited to get to work. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time on The Broken Sword.
Build me an army worthy of Mordor.